Hello, and thank you for joining us for our webinar on getting the most into your MEDITECH scanning solution. Today's webinar is focused on how our conversion services will help with the accuracy and efficiency of your migration process. We understand the struggles of migrating from legacy systems while following a strategic go-live schedule. We hope to introduce some tools and services to assist in your migrations and help you to optimize your MEDITECH scanning and archiving. My name is Brittany White, and I'm a part of the product marketing group here at Forward Advantage. I will be the moderator of today's webinar. Our speakers today are Steve LaRue and Todd Ledyard. Todd is the Director of Sales at Forward Advantage and has over 10 years experience in healthcare. Steve is our Director of MIS, and prior to Forward Advantage, he worked at MEDITECH in the scanning and archiving group and has a wealth of knowledge on this topic. We are fortunate to have two very knowledgeable team members with us today to share their experience and expertise around these services. There are a lot of people on the line, so your phones are muted. If you have a question, please enter it in the question panel, and we'll do our best to get to those questions at the end of the webinar. We'll be recording this webinar, and we'll send it out in an email with a link to the recording after the webinar has concluded. Thank you for your time. And with that, I will pass it over to Todd.
Thanks, Brittany. Can you hear me clearly?
We can, yes, thank you.
Perfect, thank you. So I am going to take over the slides here and hopefully do a decent job here. I want to thank everyone again, as Brittany shared, that we're so glad that you all could attend. So a couple things on the agenda. We actually have a number of topics we're going to touch on. We're going to try to touch on each one briefly, leaving plenty of time for questions at the end. Primarily, we're going to talk about scanning and archiving conversions. So generally, when we talk about MEDITECH scanning and archiving, we talk about legacy conversions from systems like Valcos and tools and things like that. So we'll delve into that, as well as optical character recognition for business office scanning. So we'll talk a little bit about a technology that we've built with the help of MEDITECH that can provide OCR for your business office scans. With that, we've obviously got to talk a little bit about business office scanning for MAGIC. So we do have some options available for our MAGIC hospitals that maybe don't have business office components built into them, but we can help provide some technology there. And then 835 and 837 file processing. So there's a component that we've built into our technologies that we can share with you. One of the things that a number of our customers have asked for is us to help make 835s and 837s a little bit easier to read and a little easier to process. So we'll talk some about that. In addition to, Steve's going to touch on inbound faxing to the ECM filer or cold feed. Most of you probably know of that as the cold feed for MEDITECH. So we can talk a little bit about how we can place images into cold feed and automate some of that process for you. And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit about other document storage options. There are some other solutions that we can convert into. We've helped hospitals move data to other, I should say, legacy systems into replacement systems, but weren't necessarily MEDITECH. So with that, I will turn it over to Steve, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Todd. At Forward Advantage, we've been working on scanning and archiving conversions since 2010. We've done more than 150 conversion projects, accounting for over 2 billion files converted. And just to look below at some of the systems we've converted off of and brought into MEDITECH scanning and archiving, our conversion service offering offers a lot in terms of being able to extract from other vendor systems, converting files into the MEDITECH required format, which is single-page TIFF. We work with customers through the testing and validation process, and actually when it comes time to go live, we run the import files into the live system. We have a lot of expertise both on the MEDITECH side and on the document side in working with all these systems. And one of the things I wanted to mention that's been of interest of late, we have seen a number of instances where customers maybe hadn't put relevant information into a document storage solution, and it's still residing in their legacy HCIS. We are able to extract reports from legacy HCISs, and then we go ahead and convert those to be brought into MEDITECH via the scan and conversion process. Business office scanning, so MEDITECH in client server, I believe release 5, 6, 7 and beyond, including all 6X releases, offers business office scanning. It's a very generic scanning tool designed for HR, payroll type documents that aren't necessarily a good fit for MEDITECH's eChart. Those of you familiar with MEDITECH Business Office scanning know the process of scanning into MEDITECH, assigning a form ID, and then assigning what are called archive keys. Archive keys are the search tools that are available for finding documents within MEDITECH. Some time back, Forward Advantage started working with MEDITECH to add on an extension, and that is our Find It product. What Find It does is it adds content searching to those business office scans. So if you're dealing with large documents within MEDITECH, oftentimes it can be difficult to find the information you're looking for. For instance, if you're scanning in EOBs that have hundreds of patients, finding the appropriate EOB and the account on a document is challenging. So what Find It does is it takes all of the documents that have been brought into MEDITECH's business office scanning, applies OCR technology over them to read the text, and then that allows it to be searchable within Find It. So over on the right, there's one of the examples of a search screen where you can enter in the criteria, perhaps wording or a specific account you're looking for, and any of the matching documents will be returned below and can be viewed. The Find It tool uses a series of NPR reports to get a listing of all the documents that have been scanned within MEDITECH, and those are OCR'd on a regular basis to make them highly available within the Find It solution. As I mentioned, business office scanning is only available in certain releases. It is not an option for Magic. So one of the things we're going to hit on in the next slide is something called Capture It, which is something we can offer up to Magic customers who do not have the ability to put business office scans into MEDITECH. This icon here, right after the scanner, is where Capture It comes into play. So it sits in between your scanner and the Find It solution. And the Capture It screen is very simple. The concept of it is somewhat similar to MEDITECH's business office scanning. When a scan hits a certain folder on a user's PC, Capture It launches automatically to allow the user to tag appropriate information with that image, such as the application, the type of form, and any of the archive keys that may help in searching. Then once that's done, the user can hit accept, and the scan is sent off to Find It, where it will be OCR'd, and then any of the text content on the scan itself can be searchable within Find It. We have had some instances where this has been of value for non-Magic customers, if there's something that doesn't necessarily belong in MEDITECH. For instance, if a customer does not have HR, but wants to scan in resumes, they may find Capture It as a useful tool. In the agenda slide, Todd mentioned some things that we can do with 837s and 835s. Chances are, if you're processing them electronically, the data itself is actually already stored within MEDITECH. But what we can do is parse that data to make it nicely viewable. So for an 837, we split it out into the format that matches the UB04. We can overlay it onto a UB04 template, and then we can send it back into MEDITECH through the ECM filer, or we can send it to Find It as well. So if we sent it through ECM, you'd be able to set up your forms in the eChart so that you can hide it from appearing in the eChart, but allow it to appear on the individual account and billing. Same idea with the 835s. 835s may have multiple accounts on them, but we can split them into individual accounts, make it a nice viewable report, and again, file it into ECM or into Find It. Inbound faxes into ECM, or really any sort of inbound document that is not account-based. It can be a challenge figuring out how to get that into MEDITECH, since the requirement is that it needs to have an account. So Forward Advantage developed something called Rapid Filer. Rapid Filer looks for incoming documents on a network folder and then creates certain processing queues for a user to look at the documents. The user will pull up the fax or whatever other incoming document it is and be able to assign it to an account to go into MEDITECH. One of the really nice features of Rapid Filer is we can tie it into your DR, so that when we're looking up the unit number and account number, we're making sure we're grabbing a valid account number. Anyone who's familiar with the ECM filer knows that the most common reason for failure is an invalid account. So being able to tie into DR and ensuring that you're grabbing a proper account really cuts down on the number of rejections. Another nice thing for multi-page documents, you can split them apart within Rapid Filer. If there are pages that you don't need, you can discard them. And if it's multiple account, splitting up the pages allows you to assign those individually and send it into the ECM filer. All right, what about documents that cannot be converted? If we're going back to MEDITECH scanning import, one of the biggest requirements is the valid account number. So you need that unit number, account number, and form ID. Sometimes from whatever system you're coming from, that data simply isn't available. Or otherwise, there may be other documents that you aren't appropriate to go to the eChart, or you don't want to bring them in for volume reasons or something else. There are two basic options we're going to talk about today. Simplest solution, we can extract from whatever system you're coming from, put all those documents in some network storage location, and build metadata files. That's valuable if you think you may need the file sometime down the road. You may do some conversion sometime down the road because you'd be able to use those metadata files to build whatever conversion files you need. A little more of an advanced solution, we've developed something called the Historical Archive Viewer. What the Historical Archive Viewer does is it allows all those documents to be viewed based off of whatever metadata is available. So if you have a lot of documents without account number, but maybe they have Social Security, we can build it so that you can pull those up in the Archive Viewer even though they don't have an account number. We can add that Social Security lookup. It doesn't require files to be converted first, so PDFs can be viewed in here. MEDITECH archives the MTA files, TIFF files, PNG, whatever it is, we leave them in its native format, and you can view it within the Historical Archive Viewer. There is also the ability to print from that viewer, so if you're releasing a bunch of documents for an account at once, you can do that. It's a really simple tool and basically built on top of whatever data is available that we're able to extract. With that, I'm going to hand it back to Brittany.
Thank you. Thank you to both Steve and Todd. I hope this session has given everyone a better understanding of how Forward Advantage can assist with your scanning conversion needs. This ends the formal portion of the presentation today. We do have a few questions, and we'll do our best to get through them. If your question doesn't get answered, we'll follow up with a response individually after the webinar. So to move into the first question, I have, can you convert to systems other than SCA? And I guess I'll give that one to Todd.
Thanks. That's perfect. So SCA being scanning and archiving is a component of MEDITECH. And the answer is yes, we can convert to most systems. typically all we need to see is an import specification from the vendor that you're replacing your existing system with. And with that, we can typically quickly tell you what the output's going to look like and what we need to do for the conversion. But we've converted to quite a few systems, and we'll be glad to talk to you about any that you might have in mind. Thanks, Brittany.
Thank you. Another question we have is, can you convert reports from legacy acute and ambulatory HCIS into SCA, and how does that process work? Todd, if you can take that one as well.
Certainly. So there's kind of a rule of thumb associated with the type of data that we can put in MEDITECH scanning and archiving. It generally has to be a printed report format. We generally convert those into single-page TIFF, and that often applies to most replacement systems that are looking to, where you might be looking to host scans or relative archive data. In this particular scenario, if you have a report in any of those EMRs that Brittany just mentioned, if it's printable, we can generally automate that print component and make that image usable in MEDITECH scanning and archiving or most replacement systems. So as long as it's printable, we'll force that printer, or I should say we'll force that print job to a virtual printer, convert it to a TIFF, and make it importable into most replacement systems. Hopefully that answered most of the question, and if you have a follow-up on that, just let me know. Feel free to contact myself. This is Todd, Steve, or Brittany. Thanks.
Thank you. I have another one. Does Find It work for legacy business office documents as well as business office scans in SCA?
So Find It actually has, and this is Todd, I'll go ahead and field this one as well. Find It can provide OCR to most images imported into MEDITECH Business Office, and I say most, but I actually mean all that go in through the MEDITECH Business Office module, as long as they're scanned in that capacity. We can also apply OCR, optical character recognition, to images not necessarily scanned through Business Office. As Steve demonstrated, Capture It is a great example of taking an image from an outside source and applying OCR to that, but not necessarily putting it into MEDITECH scanning and archiving. And the way Find It will work is we typically apply, when we install Find It in your environment, we'll set up the OCR engine to apply optical character recognition to all of your legacy images. So obviously or potentially you may have been scanning in a MEDITECH for, let's say, 6 months, a year, 2 years, and you'd certainly want those images included as part of your search criteria. In addition, once Find It's installed, we'll implement a tool or component that integrates with MEDITECH scanning and archiving to apply OCR to all your future scanned images. So you'll get a mix of both, the legacy images that were scanned in the past prior to Find It, and it'll mix in with those that are newly scanned. Hopefully that answers that question as well. And like I said, if there's follow-up or you'd like to see a demo of Find It, just let me know. Thanks, Brittany.
Thank you, Todd. I have another question. Can you use Find It with Valco converted BO scans?
This is Todd. I'll go ahead and field that as well. The answer is absolutely yes. The bulk of our initial migrations back in 2010, candidly, were Valco conversions. And what we were doing is converting the business office as well as the clinical-based images into MEDITECH. For the business office ones, we actually had a number of customers who elected just to put them directly into Find It or to host them on a storage area network and then have us apply OCR using Find It, but not necessarily import those into MEDITECH. We can do whatever works best for you. So the answer is yes. Thanks, Brittany.
And I have another question. It's kind of a two-part question. With Rapid Filer, does the folder that is to be monitored have to reside on the end user's desktop, or can it be a network folder?
Steve, that might be best for you.
Yeah, sure. This is Steve. It can be on a network folder, obviously, as long as the user has rights to that location.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, as we do want to respect your time today, for those of you who didn't get your questions answered, we'll follow up with a response in the next day or so. And as I mentioned before, we're recording today's webinar, and we'll be sending a link to the recording so you can share that with your colleagues. Now, we do still have some upcoming webinars scheduled through the end of October that you can register for. We'll be sending one last reminder email for those webinars with links to the registration pages. And I want to thank you again for attending, and please follow up with our MIS team or dedicated MIS sales team with any additional questions. This concludes the webinar.